Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Light Camera Author. I'm Jim Juno. Superman has stood as a symbol of hope for nearly 90 years. He's appeared in comic books, radio dramas, television series, blockbuster films, animated adventures, and countless works of pop culture. But behind the cape and the iconic S shield lies a story that is every bit as compelling as any superhero adventure. Who really created Superman? How did two teenagers from Cleveland develop a character who would change the entertainment industry forever? And why did the creator spend decades fighting to receive recognition and fair compensation for their work? My guest today is William Bernhardt. He's an acclaimed novelist, an attorney, and legal scholar whose best-selling legal thrillers have captivated readers around the world. In his latest book, The Superman Wars, A Battle for Truth, Justice, and an American Icon, he examines the extraordinary lives of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, the birth of Superman, and the legal battles that reshaped creative rights throughout the entertainment industry. William Bernhardt, welcome to Lights Camera Author.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, I always ask my subjects the very first question is that what inspired you to tell the story behind Superman's creation, rather than simply writing another history of the character?
Well, uh, because this story is so powerful would be the short answer. I knew a little bit about it when I started researching it, but I didn't have any idea how much went on or how influential this case ended up being. And I realized at some point this was the most important creator rights battle of modern times, which ultimately benefited not so much Jerry Siegel, the creator of Superman, but his family and all kinds of artists and creatives ever since, not just in the comic book world, but everywhere, like you were saying, in the entertainment industry.
Right, and for those of you out there who aren't familiar with the history of Superman, well, first off, the official debut, I guess, was in April 1938 with Action Comics
Yep.
#1. And if you find a copy of Action #1, send it to me, please. No,
You'll take it off their hands?
I'll take it off their hands. I'll even give them like $5 or $10 for it, you know?
Sure.
And
Mhm.
for those of you out there, Action #1, I think most recently sold for like $5.6 million or something like
Oh, I
that.
think the more recent one was in the two digits. It was
Two
like
digits.
15 million or so.
Oh, good Lord. I mean, yeah. So, and it was originally sold for a dime.
Yep.
It's a comic book. Now, Jerry Siegel and Joel Shuster. Now, Siegel especially is often remembered only as Superman's creator,
Right.
but you spent years researching him.
Mhm.
Who was Jerry Siegel as a person?
Well, as the story begins, he's a teenager in Cleveland in a not great neighborhood and in the middle of really troubled times. The Depression is on, so a quarter of the population's out of work. There's looming war in Europe. Crime is on the rise. The mob, prohibition went away, but the mob didn't. And there was a lot to worry about. And that's really the crucible in which Jerry Siegel comes up with the idea for what he will later call the champion of the weak and oppressed. And if you look at those earliest stories, Superman's not fighting supervillains or, aliens or anything. He's dealing with the problems of the day. Like in the very first, that April 38 issue you mentioned, in the first story, he takes on a domestic abuse. He prevents a woman from being wrongfully executed. He stops war profiteers and, of course, rescues Lois from kidnappers. And that's in one 13-page story. So he's the early Superman is very much a product of his times. He's like FDR New Deal crusader.
And Siegel was he the writer of the stories and
Yes.
Joseph Schuster was the artist?
Right. Joe was his best friend and a very talented artist. And as soon as we went through various iterations, but once he locked onto the billion-dollar version, the alien who comes here to help all our problems, he raced across town and Joe started drawing it. And they were off to the races. For Jerry always had confidence in this idea. Most other people didn't, but he did. He said, this could be huge. What Jerry wanted was a newspaper comic strip. It's probably hard for people listening today to imagine. It's like the flip of what we have. But at that time, comic books didn't come about until 1935, and they were considered kind of, low rent, scruffy
Right.
stuff. But the newspaper strips were a big deal, and a lot of people were making serious money in them. And so that's what Jerry wanted. And he spent years trying to get Superman placed with a newspaper syndicate. A few nibbles, but nothing ever comes in. So finally, when he thinks he's exhausted all the newspaper avenues, he looks to this comic book company that he and Joe have been working with, not on Superman, but on other features.
Hmm.
And the guy there, the guy who basically invented the modern comic book, was Major Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson. He was a writer himself. He was very friendly to writers, and he'd been wanting to do Superman for a long time and was glad when they finally gave him the okay. Unfortunately, as I think you already know, the shoe's going to drop just before Superman comes out. The Major loses control of his company to Harry Donenfeld, a guy with major mob ties, and his associate, Jack Leibowitz. And they run things very differently than the Major did. And Jerry's kind of blindsided. And I think you know where this goes. Ultimately, to get paid for that first story, they send this letter agreement. And there's a clause in there that says, basically, by the way, if you sign this, you lose control of your character and the whole feature. And Jerry signed it to his
Oh,
everlasting regret. He blamed himself the whole rest of his life. But, the Major had never tried to own anybody's characters. He just bought normal for North American for serial rights. But these guys were a whole different thing. Anyway, so Superman does get published, and he's an immediate sensation. Within a year of his release, Harry Donenfeld is a millionaire on Superman money, a character he knew almost nothing about. And Jerry and Joe are not millionaires. They did get some money in their early years, but nothing close to what others. But it was the Depression. Money was
yeah.
money, and they were glad to have it. But of course, it doesn't last.
Right. Now, and the friendship between Siegel and Schuster is
Yeah.
central to your book. So, what made their partnership so unique?
Well, they met each other in high school, of course, and they, for one thing, were about, equally socially popular and equally successful with girls, so they could easily become
Wait a minute,
friends.
wait a minute. You're saying that comic book artists they weren't popular with girls or comic.
The artist probably did better than the writer in that case, but still, not much success. And they were both working for the school newspaper, and they both shared a major love for the pulp magazines, particularly the science fiction pulp magazines, like Amazing Stories, which do in fact influence Jerry's later writing in Superman and in other cases. So many of the comic books actually are really just a extension of the pulp magazines with more pictures. Anyway, they bonded early and stuck together. They kind of needed each other. Everybody says that Jerry, he's the gentle one, he's the nicest guy on earth. But that guy could never have gotten this thing published. They needed Jerry, who was relentlessly sending things out and sending them out again and pushing, sometimes not in the most adept way, but he was the one who pushed until they got that thing published. So it was a good team.
Why was America so ready to embrace a hero like Superman?
Well, I think I touched on that. It was
Yeah.
troubled times. The economy was in bad shape. Crime was going up. Everybody was afraid we were going to get dragged into another world war. All kinds of racism. And here's this guy from another planet with all these powers. He could do anything he wants. He could take over, but he doesn't. He doesn't even want to because he's just not that person. He's more comfortable being Clark Kent and being a regular, and then saving people when they need it, on the side. But there's a modesty and a peaceful spirit in there that most people wouldn't have if they got those kinds of powers, I think.
and they couldn't have made him more, quote, American, unquote, because
Right.
from Kansas I mean, is there an that's where the ship lands, I believe.
Well, that
Yeah.
wasn't established until much later by people other
Okay.
than Jerry, but yeah, we do now say that Clark landed in Kansas and was raised by this nice farm couple, and that they made him into the nice boy that he is.
So it's like local boy makes good in the story
Yeah,
of Superman, you
right.
know. So, but how did Siegel's personal experiences shape the Superman's value of of his creation?
Well, sorry, Jerry
Clark?
basically is
Okay.
Clark, is what I was going to say. He's a little taller and thinner, but he even kind of looks like Clark, and he's got the same coin eyeglasses, and he stutters and coughs, and of course, he never has any success with Lois. But one of the ingenious parts of this strip that I think has given it longevity is this idea of the love triangle, except the same guy is two sides of the triangle, depending on what clothes he's wearing.
Or
And
what glasses he's wearing? Yeah.
yeah, or the glass. Yeah, can't forget the glasses. Absolutely. So, he's basically Jerry, but he's got a secret. It's like a Cinderella story. I may look like a regular guy, but I'm really the most special person on earth.
I read once that the look of Clark Kent, at least I think was Schuster, uh, modeled him after Harold Lloyd.
Some people have speculated that because they do kind of look alike in some of
Mhm.
them. I don't, and Jerry loved movies, and Joe did too. So who knows? But I don't really
Right.
think so.
Okay. Well, now one of the most fascinating parts of your book is the decades-long legal battle.
Yeah.
I mean, over ownership, and yeah, we touched on it a little bit earlier about how he signed the paper. Did he know what he was signing, or was it just like I'm
I
happy
don't
to?
think he really did. I don't, he'd never seen anything like that before. And of course, he should have asked somebody, but he didn't have an agent. He didn't have a lawyer. His father had passed away several years before. Joe's father was the elevator operator at a hospital. So there was no mentor or person with business experience. I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but
Mhm.
yeah, I don't think he at least understood the ramifications of what he was doing. Everything he said came true. Superman was a big sensation, but he didn't own it anymore, and he didn't
Yes.
control it.
Was there, why did it become the most important copyright stories in entertainment history? I mean,
Mhm.
to this
Well,
day, it's,
yeah, I agree. Jerry first filed suit in 1947. To set the stage, he was drafted for World War II in 43,
mm,
spent a couple years overseas. And when he comes back, he finds that not only has the company completely taken over the Superman operation, even brought Joe in-house, but also they've taken a script he created for a character called Superboy, which they rejected. Jerry was trying to create a new character and not screw it up this time, not sign the character right, which of course is exactly why Jack Leibowitz never bought it. If he's not going to own it, why bother? But while Jerry's overseas and can't do anything about it, he runs that story with that character, and then that turns into a successful series. So Jerry comes home to find they've now got two highly profitable series going, and they haven't paid him $1 on Superboy.
oh
So
wow,
you can imagine how he felt. They try and work it out, they can't. So in 1947, Jerry becomes the first American writer to sue his publisher, which was a risky step and
yeah,
did not turn out well for him, at least in the short term. And he got some money on Superboy. He did not recover Superman, but worse, they fired him from his own company, purely retaliatory. Just fired him from his own character, I meant. And as if that weren't bad enough, worse, they removed Siegel and Schuster's names from the credits.
oh
Prior to
no,
that, every Superman story said Superman created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. No more. They were erased. even when they would reprint old stories that had come out before, they'd color over the names.
Ah,
I mean, how did
yeah,
that benefit the company? To me, that's just mean spirited.
yeah, that's just
That's
being
just,
a jerk,
you know,
for want of a better term. Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Another term came to mind, but I figured I better say jerk.
yeah, just as well. I mean, we
Okay.
could argue about the legalities here all night long, but and that's covered in the book in much more detail, of course. But removing an artist's name from their work, that is wrong. That is
Yes,
morally and ethically wrong.
that's just retaliatory.
Yeah.
Now, in your research, did you find any long-standing myths about Superman that simply weren't true? Like he couldn't fly at first, could he?
No, Jerry's Superman leapt tall buildings in a single bound. And if you can fly, why would that even be noteworthy? No, the legend goes that when the Fleischer Studios did the first Superman cartoons, they asked if they could have him fly instead of bouncing around like a pogo stick because they thought that would be harder to animate, more expensive, and looked silly. So they said yeah. So the company said yes. But in fact, if you listen to the radio show, which came out before that, he's pretty clearly flying.
Yeah.
They make that whoosh sound, and it's up, up, and away. And there are even a few panels in the comics where he looks like he's flying. So that was in the air, but it's not in the first story. You're right.
What were some of the other myths that you found?
Hmm. Well, there are a couple. Gosh, which to go to first? For a long time, there was a myth that Jerry's father had been shot and killed in a robbery, which was what inspired him to go home and create a bulletproof superhero.
Mm.
Well, great story, but not what happened. His father did die in a robbery, but there was no gunfire. He had a heart attack, and Jerry was already working on Superman. So, it's not cause and effect. It's a tragic story, but I don't think it has much to do with the creation of Superman.
No, that became Batman.
Well, in a way, you're right. You say that, but when that first story, the first origin story written by Bill Finger, but credited to Bob Kane, came out, a lot of people thought he had gotten the idea from talking to Jerry Siegel.
Yeah.
I don't think it's true, but that's what a lot of people around the office thought.
Did researching the contracts signed by Siegel and Schuster that change your perspective on intellectual property law?
Well, um, no, not reading their contracts particularly. Jerry just made a mistake. Well, he made more than one mistake. Um, he continues the fight. He files another lawsuit in 65 under a different Copyright Act clause, and there's a huge public PR campaign in 75, high profile. DC Comics getting a lot of bad rap just when they're about to bring out a Superman movie. So they end up giving Jerry and Joe small pensions, really kind of they got better over time with cost of living increases. But as a writer in the Village Voice said at the time, they've solved a massive PR problem by giving the creators of Superman the same amount they pay their secretaries. Anyway,
Okay.
and if you remember that and think, oh, I know this story, you so don't. There's so much more. There's 50 more years of squabbling. But the point is that Jerry, no matter how many times he got knocked down, he got back up again.
Yeah.
And then finally, in the late 70s, uh, Congress, some believe, in part inspired by Siegel and Schuster's plight that was publicized in 75. A few years after that, Congress amends the Copyright Act to allow people to recover the rights to their own creations no matter what they've done with it. They can get it back after 50 years. You have to jump through hoops, but it can be done. Well, that opened up another window. Of course,
Yes.
Jerry passes away, but his wife Joanne, who, by the way, was the original model for Lois Lane, uh, she takes action using that clause, saying, "Hey, we want it back. It's been 50 years."
Yeah.
By this time, DC Comics is owned by Warner Brothers, and Superman makes them roughly $450 million a year, no matter what. So you can imagine the reaction. There's more lawsuits. And when Joanne passes away, it's continued by their daughter, Laura. And, I don't want to tell the whole story, but I will say if this sounds relentlessly depressing, it's really not. And it does lead to ultimately a happier ending, but not until 2016, almost 70
Uh,
years after Jerry filed the first lawsuit.
my gosh. Now, what lessons should today's writers and filmmakers and artists, I guess, for that matter,
Yeah.
learn from the Siegel and Schuster experience?
Well, that's a great story. Great question, because that ties into, why this is important. And the vultures are still out there today. They take a different form, but they are still very much out there. I have a writing conference I host every year. It's called WriterCon. It's Labor Day weekend, Oklahoma City. Great conference, if I do say so myself. Um, and one of the things, of course, there's education and information and teaching and all that. But one of the things I always emphasize is meet people, because there will come a time when you might need to ask a question or might need some kind of critique or feedback or whatever. So meet people and inform yourself of what's going on. Every year I see somebody who comes up and they've paid 15,000 bucks to a vanity press, to get an awful version of their book that nobody's ever going to see. That's just really appalling. So
Yeah.
we try and teach people how to avoid that, and you've got to, look, guys, if the publisher wants money from you, run. That's not the
Yeah.
way it's supposed to work.
No, it's like you don't pay, you get paid. That's the way it
Yeah,
works.
right. And of
Uh,
course, AI has created all kinds of new scams. So if you're like me, you have to wade through all that inbox garbage that seems at first blush very convincing because it's written by an AI program who's probably scraped this interview and scraped my book, and then so they can talk, intelligently about it. But they want money, or they want your information that they're going to sell or something like that, and all kinds of things. And while I'm saying just let me say, don't make Jerry's mistake. Don't sign anything without getting a second set of eyes on it, a lawyer or maybe a very experienced agent or industry professional.
well, a lot of the superhero movies nowadays, they get dark. They have
Mhm.
gritty, I mean, they call it grittiness or whatever. I call it
Right.
depression. But but why does Superman's optimism continue to resonate?
Well, he's become, people say all the time, a global symbol of hope. He's going to be there like no matter what, even in fictional form. And I think that's really appealing to people to have something like that that they can look up to. Superman is bright. Like you were saying before, their origins are completely, I mean, are they completely different? Actually, you're making me think about this, but Bruce lost his parents,
Hmm.
Clark lost his parents, and everybody else on the planet,
Everybody, yes.
with a few exceptions, but you know, but isn't that more tragic? But he doesn't remember it. He was raised on Kansas by nice farm folk, and but anyway, he's the bright side. The Dark Knight was deliberately chosen by his creators for, among other reasons, to be the antithesis of Superman, to be a hero, yes, but to look like a whole different thing.
Well, I tell you
I'm
what,
with you though. I don't really love the dark movies either. I loved last year's Superman movie. I thought, yeah,
yeah, that
that's
was
the
great.
Superman I remember from comics I read when I was a kid.
See, and that's why, and I'm glad to hear you say that because I liked it too. I mean, I was like, okay, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
Um, and personally, I think that's why Supergirl had trouble this year, because
hmm
they went in the opposite direction. And I'm like,
This is going to sound silly, but that movie was not only kind of tonally dark, but it was visually dark.
Yes,
It
it was.
was sometimes I had trouble telling, what they were handing or what was going on. And I think that's a mistake. Even if you're going to tell a darker story, people really don't go to comic book movies, I think, so that they can see like German expressionism. They want to be able to see what's going on.
Well, I tell you what, William, it's been great having you. William Bernhardt is the author. The book is The Superman Wars, and it reminds us that behind every legendary character are the creators who own stories and they deserve whose own stories rather deserve to be remembered. William, I want to thank you again for being on Light Camera Author today.
Oh, thanks for having me. This has been great.
And I want to thank everybody who's watching and listening. Please like and subscribe. That keeps us going. And down in the left-hand corner, you'll find a little QR code that you can scan to find more information about the Superman Wars. So until next time, I'm Jim Juno. Keep reading, keep watching, and discovering the stories behind the stories.